Salamun alaikum and welcome to the Crux. This season of the Crux will be exploring a variety of issues which are pertaining to the month of Muharram. Joining me today is Sheikh Ahmed Hanif as always, and we'll be dissecting, deconstructing and essentially getting to the crux of a very important topic. Today we'll be looking at the remembrance of Imam Hussain. Muharram is an extremely important time for all of the Shia community and the Muslim community globally. It's becoming more and more apparent as a community that this is a time of understanding for people who are especially surrounding us across the British community, and to see where we as a community are going with our remembrance. But in order to look where we're going, we need to assess where we started from. And so to dissect this issue and to look into the crux of it, once again I'm joined by Sheikh Ahmed Hanif. Salamun alaikum, Sheikh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
It's always a pleasure to see you. And I know that it's been quite a journey to get to the studio today. But inshallah, we're all here for hopefully to learn from yourselves. And I'm sure the viewers at home are really taking to the crux as well. We've had a lot of positive feedback. And so this month is going to be really interesting because a lot of the times we take the things which we've grown up with, especially if you've been born into a Shia family and you sort of have the remembrance of Aba Abdullah in your household, you sort of take it at face value, you know. You don't find the depth. And now, especially the youth living in the West, there is more of an inquisition, you're more... I think you're
more challenges. You're more challenged.
You are challenged, and
in terms of what you do and
you're not only challenged by non-Muslims, but over here in the generation we're living in, by other sects about your beliefs, about why, for example, the Shia sect will take the remembrance of Aba Abdullah as something so centric, especially to their identity. So it's a very important topic because many people may be thinking at home, you know what, we've heard it all before, the remembrance of Aba Abdullah, the importance, etc., etc. But I firmly believe that still we haven't really truly had a proper and open discussion, well I haven't, about the remembrance and where that lies in today's society as well. Because 1400 years is quite a long time to be remembering an individual who you've never met before in your life.
I think you're absolutely right, but I think also it's part of the Western cultural experience, you know, where you are expected to question everything, you know, and to find the deeper reasons for things, you know, and I think we are well positioned in this particular cultural nexus to be able to do that.
It's definitely something which is very interesting because historically speaking, we can see that Islam entertained the whole idea of questioning and to question, right? And now this is a trait which unfortunately a lot of the times we don't find in the Muslim community, the modern Muslim community, but we'll find in the non-Muslim community. But nevertheless, let's start off with the first question, and it's extremely important. What does the month of Muharram actually mean as a month? Because we've talked about sacred time and sacred space, and I feel like that's going to keep coming up as well in the overall discussions with Muharram. But Muharram as a month, what does it actually mean?
Well, you know, the first month of every year for the majority of cultures and civilizations of the world is a month an occasion of happiness and joy and hope, right? You know, we have the New Year, you know, whether it be the Muslim New Year or the Christian New Year or the Chinese New Year, okay? New Years are always a month and a time of celebration, you know, and looking forward to success in life and so forth and so on. And the fact that this new year begins with a horrible tragedy this tragedy makes it extremely poignant for people to reflect upon this sort of paradox or this contradiction, you know, that it sort of symbolically says to us that in this time where we all tend to come together and celebrate, it says to us we should come together and mourn. And I think, why mourning? There is a statement in the Christian tradition which says, "The light shineth forth in the darkness, and the darkness comprehendeth it not," which indicates the tragedy of the spiritual guide in a time of ignorance. And there is no greater ignorance than the ignorance of those who have the truth.
Very interesting.
But who refuse to see it. So I think it is a great symbol for us, you know, for us to take heed, you know, that in this latter day of the human existence, the essential quest is the quest for truth in a time of aggressive darkness.
Aggressive darkness.
Yes.
And so when we look at the narrative of Karbala, it's very interesting because it opens up with a clear distinction between truth and falsehood.
Absolutely.
We see that in the narrative of Aba Abdullah. And when you were saying we don't value, like one who has access to the light doesn't really truly value that light, right?
Exactly.
And that's what sort of the narrative seems. And when you read about the event of Karbala, that's the most important thing, is that the grandson of the Prophet is in front of them, but yet they cannot recognize his true greatness and his worth.
We see him appealing to the Islamic identity, the Islamic reality of what they claim, you see, but they cannot see. And it shows us, you know, that this is one of the fundamental problems of religion, that religion might bring the truth, religion might reflect the truth, but people reduce it to ritual, you know, and to subscribing to it. You know, they are reduced to looking at religion only as an outward phenomenon, but are unable to tap into the inner reality of the spiritual reality of religion.
Esoteric as well.
Exactly, which leads them to be able to, if they were able to tap into that, it would lead them to recognizing the truth outwardly. It also shows that, for example, the potential and the possibility of non-Muslims to come to a realization of that truth, the truth of Islam, faster than Muslims.
Okay.
You see?
Yeah.
So you have Christians, you know, recognizing this truth and giving their lives for this truth before those people who claim to be Muslims and who claim to be following a Muslim authority are able to do this.
It's such an interesting way of also unpacking Karbala, because we've already touched upon two themes, and those themes are so important, but we also neglect them, because I think we also fall into the trap that had we been there on the day of Karbala, we would be on the side of Aba Abdullah. But it wasn't that easy, or else there wouldn't have been 72. And like you said, there wouldn't have been people joining on the day who were non-Muslims. Like you had the Christians, for example,
right.
the whole thing. And that is such an important reminder, which we should always keep in front of us as well throughout this month, that it is not as easy as we think it is to just go into a battle for a few hours and that's it.
Yes.
Because when we look at the event of Karbala, it's only an event which lasts for a few hours. We tend to forget that. We think, oh no, it spanned over 10 days, but the battle itself was only a few hours.
Yes.
And I guess that is one of the beauties of this time. But before we go for a break, very, very quickly, you did touch upon ritualism and spiritualism. And I want to continue that discussion. But before we do go to the break, there's a very aesthetic, clear thing of wearing black, for example, and showing that you are mourning. Where does this come into place with the esoteric side?
Well, black means ignorance. Black means non-existence. Black has many meanings. There are also positive meanings of black. For example, black meaning wisdom, right? Sophia, for example, from which you get philosophy and so forth, means black. You know, it has a black sort of aspect to it. But in general, you find that black means is associated with things like evil, with things like ignorance and darkness and so forth. In this case, it also means sorrow. Okay, so you would find that people, many places all over the world, associate black with sorrow, you know, and the snuffing out of the light, you know, because this was the snuffing out of the light of the Imam of that time, you know. So it does have a very, very important symbolic and also psychological effect upon human beings. Because when we are in a black room, when we are wearing black, you know, it tends to sort of bring down the emotional aspect of ourselves. It reduces us from happy to sad, you know. So that is also very important. And I think we cannot underestimate the role of symbolism in spirituality itself.
Most definitely. And we will continue this discussion, learning so much on the way, and I'm sure you guys are. Make sure you keep using the hashtag if you are watching the Crux to send in your feedback or even your thoughts if you're using Twitter, and you can drop us a message on Facebook. We'll see you after the break. Welcome back. You're watching The Crux with Zen Hedrawan, and as always, we are joined by Sheikh Ahmed Hanif. Today we're opening up the whole season of Muharram, and we're getting to the crux of the remembrance of Imam Hussain. Before the break, we were having a discussion around symbolism. We talked about the importance of this month and how it's very different to the other months as well. And one of the key points which was mentioned as well is that this month is challenging our sort of own comforts and our comforts of being Muslim essentially as well, because the narrative of Karbala separates the people who are Muslim by name and Muslim by nature, right? And those that actually admire values and those that actually uphold and embody those values. Right. Sheikh, you mentioned something which is, I wanted to sort of come back to that issue, or come back to that reference. You referenced the Bible by the verse you were using between lightness and darkness.
It wasn't. I can't remember if it's the Bible.
Okay, if
right?
it's not the Bible, it's a Christian statement.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
so it's a Christian statement. And the reason why it got me thinking during the break about another quotation, but this is directly from for example, I think the New Testament. Yeah, it would be from the New Testament. And I once saw it at an Arba'een march in London about 4 or 5 years ago. And I remember it because at the time I was quite young, and I see this statement. And you know, normally you have the typical Imam Hussain this and Imam Hussain that. But all that statement said was Jesus wept. And I never understood, and it had the reference.
It's the shortest verse in the New Testament.
In New Testament.
The shortest verse.
And it's just Jesus wept.
Yes, there's a whole verse, that's it.
And somebody had this on a placard, and he had done it by hand. And I didn't understand at that time what that actually meant. But when I think back to that point, and why it stuck with me so much, is the fact that it shows the human element of every man is his emotion, right? And what I find very perplexing was sometimes a lot of the times people won't fail to understand or fail to comprehend is the fact that they say normally Islam is telling you to control your emotions, but when it comes to Abu Abdullah, there's this exception, right? About weeping and mourning for him. And you did touch upon mourning before the break, but what role does the tears and the weeping have within spiritual wayfaring as well?
Well, first of all, I think when Islam does teach controlling the emotions, okay, especially the emotion of anger.
Yeah.
All right, it places a high value on controlling our anger. So it's not every emotion,
Right.
but it does attach great value to the emotion of sadness, to the extent that, for example, weeping is a very important preliminary or condition for the answering of dua.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's the weeping from the eyes or the weeping from the skies.
Yeah.
You know, so when it's raining, it's a
Wow.
good time
Very interesting.
to make dua. You know, and there are many hadith that talk about weeping as something that softens the heart.
Yeah.
You know, and shatters the crystallization of the soul. You know, so weeping is something that is a very, very important spiritual prerequisite, or I should say emotional prerequisite for spiritual ascendance.
Right.
Yeah, and it is almost by divine favor, you know, or divine plan that this tragedy of Karbala takes place, that evokes from even the hardest of hearts sadness, because with sadness and tears comes empathy, and what follows on empathy is love. One of the reasons why we love little children is because they are so helpless. You know, so if, for example, there's a whole lot of people sitting in one place,
Right.
and they're not related to a little child,
Yeah.
and they see that child toddling off in the distance and it falls,
Yeah.
everybody feels love.
Yeah.
Everybody feels compassion, and that compassion leads to a forgetfulness of self, you know, and going outside of the self, you know, towards the other, you see. So emotion is extremely important. And there's some people who try to put this emotion down. They don't understand, you know, that it is a very important means whereby we could love the Imam. And through loving Imam Hussain alayhi salam, that becomes a vehicle for us to love all of the other Imams. And then the Prophet, you know, and then even going towards loving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by virtue of the fact that that's a silsila, that's the divine chain that goes back to Allah. You know, you cannot love Allah without loving the Prophet. And you cannot love the Prophet without loving his children.
Right.
You know, and his daughter and so on. You cannot. You know, she's a silsila, you see. And also because of the fact that their lives of suffering and injustice done to them, you know, makes us weep for them, and in that weeping it shatters the egocentrism of our hearts, you know, and makes us open to spiritual influence.
It's very interesting because essentially the crux of the grief does come to love as the value, as an element of why we feel that empathy and why we feel the grief. But there is this the perplexing thing about the love for Abu Abdullah al-Hussain and his family, and for his side, is the fact that the eyes have never seen, the hands have never experienced. There's been no sort of physical, and you know within every single reality and the fact of your matter, like for example the physical reality, he transcends that, and his narrative transcends that. And why it's so interesting is because as a phenomena, grief in a human sort of aspect, if somebody was to grieve, for example, if I've lost someone dear to me, the first year will be very, very hard. The second year will be hard. But then the third year and fourth year, and subsequently, the emotions that wound begins to heal. Why is it with Aba Abdullah, it sort of gets deeper within your life? The emotions become greater when you have more human experiences in your life.
Well, I think it is possible for it to be forgotten. I think it's possible for, yes, of course. It's possible if it's not mentioned.
Yeah.
Okay? If it's not mentioned, right? If it's not commemorated. If it was just written in a book as a historical phenomenon. You read that book, you feel it when you read it, you close the book and you forget about it eventually, right?
Yeah.
You know, and this is why the Imams, alayhim salam, have emphasized that we should always commemorate this so that we can keep it alive. And it has in it the elements that are conducive to it being kept alive by virtue of the suffering, the kind of suffering, you know, the atrocities that first reared their heads in Islam. You know, it becomes, suitable,
right,
for it to be remembered.
And most definitely, it's one of the, I don't think there is any other remembrance or mourning of this kind in any other religion or any other culture to the extent. I mean, we have Easter, but Easter's more of a, it's not done in the same way. I mean, like you'll have, for example, in the Philippines probably.
Good Friday.
Yeah, the Good Friday morning. But the narrative of Karbala essentially is something which in itself is very, very unique in its remembrance. Yeah,
I mean, I was about to say, while you were speaking about this, I was thinking that the commemoration of the crucifixion of Jesus, and I don't want to get into whether it happened or not, but the commemoration of the crucifixion of Jesus is almost comparable.
Yeah.
You know, and I think you're right. Without being, sectarian or Muslim-centered, you know, I think if the objective person, when they look at the passion of Imam Hussain alayhi salam and the passion of Christ, one can see that the passion of Imam Hussain alayhi salam is much more multidimensional. You know, it includes many others. Okay. The Passion of Jesus, for example, is very much concentrated around Jesus himself, you know, in terms of going through that type of suffering. So it has many dimensions of Imam Hussain.
But also you see a lot of synergies, whilst there is differences as well, but you see, just even in the life of Aba Abdullah, you'll see the comparison a lot of the times with the life of Jesus. People will find synergies between the two. And what I find very interesting is the fact that you do have those that uphold and love Jesus, who are Christians, who would then partake in even in the direct story of Karbala. We have for example, the incident, even post Karbala, of when the head was kept inside the monastery. And so, again, because the reason why I want to leave it at that spot is because I know next time we're going to be opening up a discussion about the universalism of Aba Abdullah al-Husayn's message. So it leaves us at a nice spot to leave the viewers to think about the questions which we've asked. But essentially, we've got down to a lot of elements. And one thing which is, I want to quote you, and that is the fact that this event and this narrative is multidimensional. And again, just a reminder to everyone at home, this month which we have in front of us, these days of commemoration are extremely deep, and as we're learning, have a variety of facets to them. And it's down to us to reflect, to think, and essentially to challenge ourselves and our own understandings of what we take from this month. And inshallah, for all of us, it will be a very productive and developing month. Please keep us in your prayers, especially in these days. And if you have any comments or feedback, please do get in touch. The details are below. Till next time, keep questioning. From your host, Zain Hyderwan, and from my guest, Sheikh Ahmed Hanif. Ma'as salam.